Welcome everyone to today's session. We are excited to have you all join us here, and in particular our guest speakers for today from the U.S. Embassy in Doha, Qatar. We have Rachel Sundin, Consular Chief, and Dean Wilson, Homeland Security Attaché, with us. So before we get into our topic today, I just wanted to welcome everyone and introduce you to Education USA. We appreciate all the questions that were submitted in advance, and we'll direct those that aren't related to today's topic, direct you to where you can get that information and also connect with us individually. But we are looking forward to addressing really the student visa and safety and security factors in the US. First, Education USA is a US Department of State global network that has offices located throughout the world. We have centers based in embassies, consulates, NGOs, Fulbright commissions, universities. So we are quite spread out. And our purpose really is to be an official source of information for anybody, students, whether they're high school or postgraduates, anyone interested in higher education in the United States. So we provide information, we provide support, advice, and guidance in how to navigate the US higher education application process, understanding terminology, understanding requirements and procedures. So for those of you that asked questions about scholarships and financial aid, we have a lot of previously recorded sessions regarding those topics on the Education USA Qatar Facebook page. Or for those of you joining from other countries, those are also available on the Education USA page in your country. You can also look up the YouTube, social media videos, playlists for a variety of topics as well with the Education USA global brand. So we are really excited to be able to connect you with the information that you need for this very important step in the process, which is the student visa process. But then also once you're in the States, what are those key things that you should be aware of and be prepared for? So today's session is specifically about those people, those students who are in the US on student visas. So this is not a session regarding immigrant visas or other categories of visas. So really focus your questions, pose them in the Facebook chat or in the Zoom Q&A chat box so that we can get to your questions at the appropriate time. So now I will turn it over to Paula Masad, who will moderate today's session and get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. This is a very exciting session, and I'm really excited to have Rachel and Dean here to help talk us through your questions and introduce us to the process and important things to remember once you do arrive in the United States with your student visa. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to get us started.
Thank you, Paula. Hello out there. My name is Rachel Sundin. I'm the Consular Chief at the U.S. Embassy in Doha. I know we have some participants listening from other countries. A lot of what I will talk about is standard for the student visa application process around the world, but specifics about what embassies are doing and their level of services they're able to provide during COVID are very country specific. So please always check the website of the U.S. Embassy in the country where you will be applying for your visa. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is the student visa process and what you need to do to apply for your student visa. I'll start by saying that getting into a university or a college in the United States should be your hard part, the part where you devote most of your time to make sure you end up getting admitted to the university of your choice. Getting a visa if you're a qualified student is a rather straightforward and simple process. So right now, the U.S. Embassy in Doha is open for all classes of service and all visa types that are allowed under current regulations. So that means you can go online and book an appointment yourself and come in if you're looking for a specific type of visa. As I said, not every post or embassy around the world is at the same operating status. So student visas are a priority to the U.S. Embassy in Doha and the State Department at large. So in Doha, we're committed to making sure that we have enough appointments to allow students to come in and apply for their visa before their school start date. We don't want anybody missing the start of their program because they can't get a visa appointment. So the steps to getting and applying for a student visa are rather straightforward. Once you're admitted to a university, the university will issue you something called an I-20 form. Now, some universities require that you pay a deposit to get an I-20, some don't. That's completely up to the university. But the universities all know what I-20s are, and they will be able to issue them to all foreign students coming to the United States. So once you get your I-20, then you also need to pay a fee, which is called a SEVIS fee, which is part of the Student Exchange Visitor Program. And it's sort of a program to sort of check and vet everybody. Once you have those two documents, as long as it is more than 120 days before the start of your academic semester or term, you can apply for your visa. So what you need, and you can even do this a little before 120 days, but what you need to do is go to our embassy website and follow the rules, the instructions for completing a DS-160, which is a visa application fee, and paying your fees, and then you'll be able to schedule your appointment. So you could start 140 days out, but please do not book your appointment until it is 120 days or less before the start of your school year. And then once your appointment date comes up, you come to the embassy, you bring your I-20 and your SEVIS fee with you along with your passport. Please make sure you have submitted a current photograph as part of your application fee, because if that photograph is not current, we will have to send you a way to get a new one and it will delay everything. And then the other thing that you need to have is information about how you're going to pay for your first year of school. And so, you know, people's families fund education in many different ways. Some people get scholarships from their government or the university. Some people's families fund it. Some people take out a loan. Whatever it is, you just have to be able to explain to the officer what you have. They may ask to see you know, your bank statement if you say you're paying in cash out of the bank. And you just need to be able to explain that. And then assuming that all of that checks out, or everything is a match, then you will be approved for your visa, and then you will receive your visa. Once you have your visa in hand, and as long as you're still going to that same university, when it gets to be 30 days or less before the start of the program, you can travel to the United States and enter. And as a general rule, students are granted a 5-year visa, which will give you plenty of time to complete most degrees, because, you know, an associate's degree usually takes 2 years, a bachelor's takes 4 years. And then you can travel back and forth while you're in school. You know, if you want to come home for the holidays, you'll have your visa and be ready to go back. A couple questions that always come up when we talk to students are, what if I want to go earlier so that I can rent an apartment or buy a car or, you know, visit my friends? If you want to enter the United States more than 30 days before the start of your school program, you actually have to travel to the United States on a tourist visa. So you would have to be able to, you have to apply for a tourist visa, go to the United States, do your visit, then exit and re-enter on your student visa. So that's something to keep in mind. The other question we get often is, you know, I'm going to university, my parents want to come and help me get settled, pick out an apartment. That's great. We completely understand that it's, you know, very common that people might want to have family members take them and get them settled. And that's fine. Those people would apply for a straightforward tourist visa. There is no category that exists for someone who wants to go live with you the entire time you're a student, unless they are an immediate family member, being a spouse or a child. So just keep that in mind if you want to bring somebody as an escort or chaperone. They're going on a tourist visa and they have to abide by the regulations of a tourist visa. But they can, they can still come, be there for a couple months, get you settled. So that's most of the information that I have about the student visa process. Students and universities that grant I-20s, they're looking for students that are full-time students and that there are people enrolled in a program that leads towards a degree. So that's a university that'll be able to give you an I-20. If for some reason you're going to the US, but you're going on a short exchange or you're taking continuing education class, you can do that, but you wouldn't need to get a student visa for that. If it's not something that's part of a degree-bearing program, it's just something more informal, you would do that on your tourist visa. But all the information about this can be found on our website where we go into details. But if you're a traditional student going towards a degree program, be it an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, your university will be issuing you an I-20. So that's all of the information I have about the student visa application process. As I said, it's pretty straightforward and our website has all of the details. But if you have a question, please type it in the chat box and then I can address any specific questions you may have.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll take some questions at the end. There's some specific questions about the type of documentation that students need to bring with them to their interview appointment and actually scheduling the appointment. But I'll let Dean do his part and then we'll come back to around to you with questions.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Good afternoon and evening, everybody. My name is Dean Wasson. I'm the DHS attaché at the embassy here in Qatar, and I am a supervisory special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, and it's our responsibility to enforce the immigration laws in the United States. And so I'll be available to answer any specific question you have about immigration law or general law enforcement questions. So I've put down on these slides here some frequently asked questions that seem to come up regularly when it comes to immigration law, and then some general points that I'd like to give you about general interaction with law enforcement inside the United States after you get there. So your F1 visa grants you the ability to enter the United States. And so there are a lot of misconceptions about your visa being your document that allows you to remain in the United States. But that's not actually the case. Your F1 just grants you entry every time. So in order to maintain your student status, you have to be a full-time registered student and making normal progress towards your degree. So that's the -- way that you stay in status as a student. There are a number of things that can make you out of status, and if you become out of status, then you'll have to return to your country. So let's go see the next slide. Thank you. So like Rachel said, if the student visa, the F1 visa is typically issued for 5 years. But if your visa expires while you're in the United States, the next time you travel abroad, you have to obtain a new F1 visa before returning. So just make sure that your passport is valid for at least 6 months and your visa is valid on the date that you would like to return to continue studying. If your visa runs out during that period of time, you have to go and apply for another F1. The good thing about that is that if you're in status and you're not having any problems and you're maintaining your course of study, you should be able to get that reissued without any problems. The other thing that we encounter a lot in the United States with students who have already made it there is that they have to update their I-20. And so there are a lot of different things that can happen that will make it where you need to update your I-20. And I've listed some of the major things here. If you extend your program for some reason, if you change schools, if you change the level, if you go from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree program, for example, if you change your major or change of funding. As Rachel mentioned, there are various funding mechanisms. And so if you originally go on a scholarship, maybe for 2 years, and that runs out, or you choose to self-fund after that, you need to get your I-20 updated. Failure to make these changes in a timely manner will result in you being out of status. And that's if you're out of status at any point in time after that status lapse, you could be subject to removal from the United States. So in order to keep those things from happening, make sure that you stay up on the requirements that you need. Now, the good thing is that your academic advisors are experts at all of the documentation and the changes. And so I encourage you to regularly speak with them. And if you have any questions about any changes, to please talk to them. Okay, if we could see the next slide, please. Thank you. This is also something that we encounter for all folks that come into the United States that are visiting, is that there's a law that requires you to carry your registration documents at all times. So this includes your I-20 and your passport with your stamp in it, and that's a requirement by law. And we that enforce immigration law in the United States, we realize that it's not always practical to carry your original passport with you. Obviously, you want to keep that safe. You want to keep your documentation safe. So what I'm asking you to do, and which will be helpful for you if you do encounter an immigration officer anytime during your stay in the United States, if you can at least have a photograph of that documentation, of your passport bio page, of your entry stamp or I-94, and your I-20 with you at all times, it will help the immigration officer determine your status if encountered, and it will also save you a lot of time, to include possibly being detained for further questioning if you don't have these documents available. And I just want to stress this: the law says you have to have them on your person at all times, but we realize that that's not always practical. So please keep copies or keep photographs of those documents with you at all times. Another thing that we encounter regularly with students coming to the United States from foreign countries is there's questions about work. So generally you can't work. There are exceptions to this that have to do with work on campus for a limited number of hours. Again, you can consult with your academic advisor and they will explain to you which programs are available for you to do work. There's work study and certain jobs that you can do on campus, and they'll have that information. But if you find yourself short of cash for some reason and you want to go to McDonald's and get a job flipping burgers, you can't do that. That's 100% illegal, and you will immediately be out of status if you engage in unlawful employment activity, and then you're subject to removal from the United States. So that's taken very seriously. You're not there on a work visa. You're not there to earn money. You're there to study and to get an education. And working is the first easiest way to find yourself out of status. The next thing is that we encounter problems with is that you have to notify the Department of Homeland Security within 10 days if you change your address. So if you move from one dorm to another, if you move from campus housing off campus to an apartment, or you move in with roommates or friends or relatives that may be in the United States, you have to update your address with the Department of Homeland Security within 10 days. Again, if you don't do that, that's a very easy way to find yourself out of status and subject to removal from the United States. Another thing that we encounter regularly has to do with traffic violations, minor infractions. That happens, right? You get a parking ticket, you get a speeding ticket, and then unfortunately, a lot of students will just sort of ignore that, knowing that they're not planning on living in the United States, and they'll let that lapse. And so what happens is a very minor violation ends up becoming a pretty big deal, to include the issuance of an arrest warrant. And then when you leave the country and then you try to get back in, there can be problems. Or if you apply for another visa or another visa category, you may not qualify for that category based on problems that you have. My advice to you is, if you get into minor trouble, face it, pay your fines, pay your tickets, have your day in court, and take care of it before you leave. Because if those little things are left unresolved, they can blow up into big issues for you later on. Okay, and I put this together. This is my personal advice to you as a law enforcement officer in dealing with the police if you are encountered by them in the United States. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that police officers are people, just like you, all right? Just like me. We have families, we have children, and we're there to protect the people who are citizens of the United States and also visitors. So please always be polite and respectful to police officers in the United States. Make sure you always carry some identification with you, whether it's your student ID, a driver's license, or a state issued identification card, so that the police officer can identify you if he's asked. It's a law in most jurisdictions that if a police officer asks you for your ID, you have to present it to them. That can keep you out of a lot of trouble, or keep you from being misidentified as another person. If you're contacted by a law enforcement officer in the course of his duties, be polite by keeping your hands in plain. You know, police officers they do a dangerous job, and they don't know who you are. And I'm sure that all the folks that I'm talking to out here today are very nice, law-abiding citizens, but sometimes you might be in a situation where you're contacted by a police officer and he doesn't know you, and he doesn't know if you're not a criminal sometimes, and he wants to be safe so he can go home to his family and his wife or husband and children at the end of the day. So keep your hands in plain view so the officer always knows that you're not trying to reach for a weapon or something that might be dangerous to him or her or other people that might be standing by. The other thing that you definitely want to not do is you never want to run from or strike a police officer. You will absolutely be arrested 100% of the times if either of these things occur. So evading a police officer, running from, or in a vehicle, if you are trying to get away from a police officer in a vehicle, or you do anything to hurt a police officer, you will absolutely be arrested every single time. So make sure that you never do either of those things, even if you're really upset or if you get really mad. So the other thing that I like to tell people as a law enforcement officer for, like I said, almost 25 years is we're not in the business of violating anybody's rights. You as visitors to the United States have the same rights as United States citizens. One of those rights is, as you know from watching television and movies, is that you have the right to remain silent. You never have to answer questions from a police officer, and you never have to incriminate yourself if you feel you're being accused of a crime. But the one step that I want to tell you from personal experience as a law enforcement officer is that if you do choose to exercise that right, you may be detained. You know, that means you might get arrested so that the officer can conduct additional investigation or to determine your identity or some of those things. So unless you're, and like I said, I'm not advising you to incriminate yourself in any crimes, but if you cooperate with a police officer when they ask you simple questions, it can definitely make the encounter a lot more enjoyable for you and easier for the officer to do his job. So I advise that you cooperate with the police if they contact you. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention here is that if you do choose to talk to the police, which is also your right, you have the right to remain silent, but you also have the right to cooperate if you want to. Just don't lie. Be honest with the police officers, and I believe that your encounter with U.S. law enforcement will be favorable if that's the case. So those are the things that I've put together for you this afternoon. Just like Rachel, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about immigration law or law enforcement inside the United States, or just general law enforcement questions.
Thank you, Dean. Great information for our students that are listening about how to maintain their status once they are in the United States, and things to keep in mind, things to do and things not to do. So thank you. And we do have some questions. I'm going to jump back to Rachel. Rachel, we just need some clarification about the I-20. Can you explain in a little more detail exactly what the I-20 is?
Yeah, sure. The I-20 is a form. So all accredited universities and colleges in the United States that want to have foreign students, they're accredited, they apply, and they're given the right to issue an I-20. An I-20 is literally like a piece of paper, and it talks about the student, the course of study, what the expenses are, and what they're going to be doing. So the school gives them to the student. Like I said, different schools operate differently. The majority of schools will require you to pay a deposit to indicate that you are actually going to attend the school before they issue you an I-20. Some schools will give it to any student when they're admitted. That is the decision of the university. But it's the piece of paper that basically shows us that you have been admitted to this university as a foreign student. And it talks about the expenses and also the start date for your program, which is important because you must apply for your visa prior to the start date for your program. So if you come to us, and what I'm talking about is normal times. There's a little bit of change about COVID, but in non-COVID times, if you have a start date of August 24th and you come in for your student visa on October 1st, we're gonna say, I'm sorry, but you don't appear to be a credible student. You've already missed 6 months or 6 weeks of the semester. And what would happen in that case is that if you still wanted to go to the university because you've now missed part of the semester, you would go and get a new I-20 for the next semester. COVID's a little bit different because schools and universities are online, a lot of them, and so students have had more flexibility. Start at their home country, and then as the semester progresses and the COVID situation gets better wherever the university is, they may want to then go to the university. So in those cases, and this is very COVID specific, if you show us that, hey, no, I'm enrolled for the semester, I'm taking 5 courses, I started 4 weeks ago, and COVID was so terrible, but now my university is requesting that we all come and take in-person classes. That's the only time when your I-20 start date might be before your arrival, but that's very COVID specific, and your university will walk you through that. And we will never, if somebody shows up for an interview and there's a question about their start date and their status, we will never say, you're refused, sorry, you can't go. We might say, hey, you need to go back to university, perhaps get another I-20 or sort this out or bring us proof that you've enrolled in the semester already. You know, we are very flexible. We understand this is a, you know, very unique time for everybody. Our goal is not to keep people out. Our goal is to get all credible students to the United States.
Rachel, you touched on, thank you for clarifying about what the I-20 is and that it's issued by the college or university specific to the student's program of study and start and end dates. We have another student that's asking about the timeline. So let's say the student gets the acceptance to the university, gets the I-20. When does he or she make the appointment? And then what about that timeline, the interview appointment for the...
Right, so as I said, we can't issue a student visa more than 120 days or 4 months before the start of your program. So you could go out and make your appointment 5 months before, you know, start the process, but just pick an interview date that's less than 120 days before the start of your program. Okay. But we encourage people to apply as soon as they're ready. Don't wait until a week before. So, you know, once it gets to around 120 days before the start of your program and you're sure this is the university that you want to go to, that's a great time to go online and make your appointment and come on in.
Okay. There's another student that's asking about what if you come for the interview and you're rejected? Your application is, your visa, your student visa application is rejected. What can that student do? Can he or she reapply? Does there have to be a certain amount of time that passes?
Okay, yeah, so if a student is refused for a visa, I mean, the first thing is they should listen to what the consular officer is saying about why they don't meet the qualifications for a visa. But if they hear that and they think, no, I am a credible student, I am gonna want to apply again, you are welcome to reapply again as soon as you want. We say that we encourage people not to apply again until there's a change in their situation, but that's a personal decision. There's no rules, there's nothing stopping you. You will have to complete a new DS-160 visa application and you will have to pay the MRV visa application fee again. My suggestion is though, if that is you and that's your situation, really think about the questions the consular officer asked you in the first interview and make sure that you're really ready to answer them and answer them truthfully. We know that, you know, this can be the visa interview can be, you know, a little bit of a nerve-wracking process for people. We don't want to make anyone scared. We're not there to trick people. We understand, you know, we're talking to you with masks on because of COVID. You know, if you don't understand what the consular officer is saying, just say, you know, excuse me, could you say that again? I didn't understand you. You know, these are unusual times. So just, you know, make sure that you're in a good, you know, space and that you're comfortable and relaxed. And when you come in and that you're able to answer the questions the consular officer asks, but you can definitely apply again if you feel that you are a qualified student.
Okay, thank you. What about the financial documents that the student needs to bring in addition to the I-20 and a photograph? What specific financial documents should a student bring with him?
So yeah, students should bring their I-20. Students should bring their proof that they paid their SEVIS fee.
Okay.
The photograph will have been included in their visa application, so they don't actually need a new photo. But the financial documents, again, the requirement that we're looking for is how do how are you going to immediately fund your first year of education? And what is your general plan for your entire course of study? So if you are going to university and they estimate that your tuition is $30,000 and living expenses are $15,000, so that you and your family are expected to pay $45,000 for this first year of study, if you're getting a scholarship from the school, usually it's noted on your SEVIS fee, on your I-20, which is very helpful. If you get a scholarship from an outside source, say the Qatar government is financing your education, you would bring a letter, a document that states that. If your family's paying for that, then usually, most people have their money in the bank. So a bank statement, liquid assets that they have to pay for it are very helpful. Bringing us a house title, a car title is not very helpful because those are not liquid assets. And, we're not sure your family's going to sell their family home to put you there. People fund education in all different kinds of ways. There's no right or wrong way to do it. As long as it's legal, it's just that you have to be able to clearly explain it. So if your situation is your parents are paying some, your uncle lives in Texas and you're going to go stay with him at his house because it's near the university and he's going to pay part of it, then you just have to bring in the documents that back that up. Again, we just need to understand what's going to happen and that you have enough funding to pay for your education.
Thanks, Rachel. And I think if I heard you correctly, it's really that they need to show for that first year of study. They don't need to show that they can pay for all 4 years in the initial interview.
Yeah, we're going to ask specifically about the first year, but we will ask questions about the subsequent other years. So if your school costs $45,000 and all you have is a bank statement with $45,000, we're going to begin to say, well, what are you going to do for year 2 or year 3 or year 4?
Okay.
I need all 4 years in liquid assets at the moment, but I need to understand what your plan is and be confident that you're going to be able to fund yourself for the entire course of study.
Okay, thank you. Another participant is asking if there are any additional fees to pay during or on the interview day.
The only additional fees that you would pay on the interview date is that certain countries, citizens of certain countries, have to pay what's known as a reciprocity fee. And what that means is the US government looks at what countries charge US citizens for student visas. And if they charge us extra, then we say, well, we're going to charge your citizen extra. For the student visa category, it's not too many countries, but there's, probably a few that we see all the time. So if there's a reciprocity fee for your country, you would be charged that fee. If for some reason something happens that you are approved and you don't have the fee handy with you in the minute, you forgot your wallet at home, you don't have your credit card, we're again not going to refuse you because you are a qualified student. We would just put your case into a hold status and tell you to come back the next day, pay the fee, and then we could finalize your visa.
Okay. Thank you. Then this participant is asking, what if a student wants to take his kids with him or her? Does a student have to start looking for schools for his or her children before traveling to the States?
Yeah, so if you are an adult and you have biological children and you want to take them and perhaps your spouse with you to the United States, you can. So students primarily travel on what's known as an F, like Fox visa. A few students go on a J if they're at the graduate level, but say you're an F visa, the student will be an F1, the primary person. The family members and derivatives, the biological children and spouses would travel on an F2, and they are very welcome to go with you. You would again get an I-20 from the school for them as an F2. You don't have to know what school they are going to attend in the United States. That's not a requirement. The bigger issue if you bring your family with you is you have to show us how are you going to support your family members in the United States. That's our bigger concern. So the only thing you really need to show us is, okay, these are my wife and children, here are their birth certificates, here's our marriage certificate, and the estimate is that it's going to cost an extra $7,000 a year for each of them, and here's the money I have to fund that.
And I'll interject on this point as well. Like F2s are also not eligible for employment in the United States. So like Rachel said, they want to make sure that, that they can show that you can pay for your education and also to pay for the support of yourself and your family as well. So don't apply for an F1 and F2, get there to study and say, okay, well, I'm going to try to fund my education after I get there by getting a job. And we see that on occasion, and that's a very good way to find yourself in an out of status situation.
Thank you, Dean and Rachel. Dean, we did have a student ask again about working in the United States. So could you just go over the guidelines, the 20 hours on campus, and
Yeah, so the specifics of that are that there are you can work on campus in an approved position by the school, and like I said, your academic advisor will know what those positions are and may even make a list of them available to eligible students. And there are some other specific exceptions for work study or internships, paid internships that are in conjunction with your degree program. And again, I'll defer to the school on that to make sure that you stay in status. But what I can tell you is that if it's not arranged through the school, it's not going to be legal, and you're going to find yourself in a problem with that. You'll go to a job and they'll ask you to fill out a form called an I-9, which is an employment eligibility document, and you're not going to have the paperwork that you need to be eligible for employment in the United States. So if somebody hands you an I-9 and you don't have the documentation to fill that out, you know that you're going to be in a position that you're not eligible for. So that's the best way that I can tell you, and to just consult with your academic advisor at the school, and they'll be able to guide you into the type of 20-hour-a-week jobs that you may be able to work. And it mostly has to do with either work study in relation to your degree program, or as a cultural way to interact with other people in the university community. So it's very limited, and it's absolutely not for subsistence or to make extra money while you're in the United States.
Thank you for clarifying that point. And also for students, that when you come to the United States to study at a college or university, each university that has an international student population, they have a designated school official, DSO, in their International Student Center. And that is going to be a place for you to go, and a person for you to contact on campus to help you with these questions that sometimes get a little confusing when you're in the middle of it, like the working, if you're thinking you can work off campus and you're not sure if your visa is about to expire, there is someone on that campus who is dedicated to helping you find those answers. So thank you. Let's see, Rachel, one more. Rachel and Dean, let's see. If an individual plans to conduct postdoc research in the US, what type of visa is required for postdoc research?
That gets a little complicated, and the school will be the driver. And most postdoc research, I think, is on a J visa. But the school, again, in order to do postdoc research affiliated with the university, you'll be either going on a J if it's part of an academic program, or sometimes that's considered an actual job, and then it's an H-1B. But that's up the school, and the office that issues I-20 will be the people that guide you towards that. So it depends on the university and the specifics of the job. But I would say the majority of times it's either a J visa, an H-1B, or if you've just completed your PhD on an F, you could be doing that as part of your optional practical training at the end of your degree.
Okay.
There is a way for you to do that.
Okay. And then it says, are J1 professors eligible to work off campus?
So the answer to this is that especially with J, so J's are generally allowed to work, but they can only work for the company, the agency, the university that is listed on their visa. So can a J1 work? Professor, absolutely, if it's for the school that they've applied for to work at as a professor, and they can get paid, and that's 100% fine. And they also go get a job then at McDonald's flipping hamburgers, or as a paid tutor or consultant for some other thing? The answer is no. So the specifics on the J will be listed on the visa, and that you can only work for your sponsoring, whether a company, agency, university, whatever it is that's your sponsor on that J visa.
Thank you. Then Dean, a question. How would students know if they have a fine or a traffic ticket?
Okay, well, if you get stopped by the police in the United States, no matter whether it's for a driving infraction or whether it's for, committing some sort of a minor infraction, let's say, drinking in public is illegal in some places. So if you are drinking at a house party in front of your dorm room and you're having a beer and the police come by, what they'll do is they'll issue you a citation. So you'll never not know that you have a ticket or a citation. If you are speeding, the officer they'll give you a piece of paper, and it'll have all of your information on it. It'll have the information about when you go to court, what the fine is if you choose to pay the fine, and how it's resolved, and all of the instructions will be given to you. So there's no way to not know that you have a traffic ticket or if you have a minor infraction. Obviously, if you're arrested and you get booked into a jail and they take your photograph and fingerprints, then you know that you're in a lot more serious trouble, and you'll be presented with documents post-arrest as far as anything that has to do with that. So if you get a traffic ticket, you just follow the directions, and the choices are, you can usually go to court and say, hey, I wasn't actually speeding or doing the bad thing that you allege that I'm doing, or you can go to court and say, hey, you know what, I'm guilty, I did this, and pay your fine. Or a lot of times with the traffic ticket, like I said, they give you an envelope, and you just put your money in the envelope, and you can pay your ticket that way, or put your credit card number in there and pay that way. Sometimes you have to go down to the police station and pay your ticket that way. But you'll always know if there's a problem. What you won't know is if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and then you move from your address and the court tries to send you a letter saying, hey, you need to come to court and answer this speeding ticket, and you don't get that letter because you don't live there anymore and you don't respond, then a warrant can be issued for your arrest, and it can elevate to a worse offense that maybe you wouldn't know about if you don't do that. But you'll always be notified with a summons or a piece of paper explaining to you what your rights are and what your options are to contest the infraction or ticket, or to pay the infraction or ticket.
Thank you. That's very helpful information for students. And then we have a question: if students are interested in participating in an intensive English language program, can they still apply for the F1 visa? Now, I'm assuming the English program would be issuing an I-20, but I'll let you touch on that, Rachel.
Yeah, so we see a lot of students who do that. Maybe they're part of a Pathways program where they go to a university for a year to brush up on their English and then segue into their regular course of study. In order to go on a student visa, you have to have an I-20. So there are all different kinds of places that teach English, intensive English, some more credible than others. But if you want to go on a student visa, then that school or university or center will be issuing you an I-20. If you're going to a sort of more casual English learning kind of place, that's not a college, it's just sort of more of a neighborhood spot that does it, that would be on a tourist visa because that's not an official course of study. So again, it really depends where you're going, but assuming it's a more structured, formal English language institute that's run by a university, you would be granted an I-20 for that. And the I-20 specifically talks about what you're doing and whether English fluency is required for that course of study. So, you know, we will see I-20s where people are going. English is not required because the plan is they will go to this English Language Institute for the first year and then segue into their course of study.
Okay. So if students start out in a pathway program, do they need to reapply for the visa or they can, how does that work?
No, because usually the I-20 will document all this, so we will know this at the course of entry. And the way the schools have it set up is that they will be primarily for the first year focusing on English, but they may be taking a course or two as part of their degree. So they're usually not separate. They're usually, it's all inclusive.
Unless they're transferring universities, right? They're starting in one institution and then going to move to a different institution. So.
Yeah, then they would need to change. So if you got an I-20 for one place to go study English, and then you finish your English course, and then the next year you want to go study at a different university, you would have to get a new I-20 and come in and apply for a new student visa.
Thank you. I think we've addressed the questions that we've had from our panel, from our participants. Asil or Melissa, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
There are a couple just still lingering here, which I think some of them have somewhat been addressed, but having a little bit more specific language in it. If someone's not be able to present a bank statement, kind of that, but also something related is if someone's fully funded, what's the proof of funding that they would demonstrate with regard to financial documents?
Okay, again, whatever you're telling us, you have to just be able to demonstrate it. If you get a full scholarship from your government, from the university, if it's from the university, majority of times it's going to be listed right on the I-20. It's going to say, you know, the XXX Great Student Scholarship, $45,000. And then it's going to say amount student expected to pay $0. If it comes from an outside source, then you need to show us. I mean, they're going to give you something if they give you a big scholarship. They're going to give you a letter or an award letter or something. So the onus is on the applicant to be able to show us that what they're telling us is what's actually happening. Again, it's not one ever specific thing because everybody's situation is different. But you have to have the documentation to match what you're telling us. If you're telling us you're funding it yourself, you've got to show us. If you're telling us somebody you want a scholarship, you have to show us, whatever it is.
Great. And then just about the application process itself, can it be fully done online or is there someone available to assist with that? That's a question also being shared.
The actual visa application process is pretty straightforward, and while you can have somebody else fill it out for you, it's usually better if you fill it out yourself because it's questions about you. It asks you your name, your passport number, your phone number, your parents' name, your sibling name, where you've traveled. And if you have somebody else fill that out, they tend to brush over the questions that they don't know the answer to. Sometimes they accidentally put their phone number instead of yours or their email, and then we have no way to contact you. So my suggestion is you complete it yourself. It's not a trick application. It's really asking specific questions about you, and who's better to answer the questions about you than you yourself.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think you've provided both Dean and Rachel some fabulous guidance for students who are listening today. And I think an important takeaway is that there is support for students who are getting ready to study in the United States, they can come to Education USA to ask questions about the application process. If they have visa questions, we can point them in the right direction to get those questions answered. If once they're in the United States, they have support on campuses with the DSO, the officers of the international centers. And of course, here in Qatar, we have Asil here, our Education USA advisor, and Melissa, our REAC, and me. We're all happy to help you with your questions about the US college application process. So please do reach out to us, and we'd love to hear from you. And let's see.
Well, thank you so much for letting us join. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Dean.
Very much. Thank you. And thank you everyone for signing in today. You can access the recording in case you missed part of it or want to refresh kind of answers that you heard. But we will have that available on the Facebook page. But again, you saw the contact information for Education USA. There's a lot of resources on the Facebook page, on the website to help you. How do you find a university? How do you identify places with scholarships, or what are the different types of financial aid? How do you choose where to go? Those are all the types of things that Education USA can assist with. So please, again, feel free to reach out and reference our resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.